Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Friday edition of the program. This is the final live program of the year. We're going to be playing some best of programs and interviews that you may have heard, you may not have heard. Definitely replaying those from now till January. And I'm very excited. Great show we're going to have for you tonight. Love being with you guys on a Friday night. The phone number, if you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And I want to get into a couple of things today. Of course, Joe El Baboso Biden's always up to his usual. And there's the Supreme Court. They said, we are not going to weigh in on Jack Smith's request. Of course, Jack Smith was appointed special counsel by Merrick Garland. And he asked the Supreme Court to weigh in and see if Trump's claim had validity, his claim that he was immune from prosecution because of his position as president of the United States and having qualified immunity or presidential immunity. So the Supreme Court has denied Jack Smith the opportunity to clarify that. So super. We also have the annual Rand Paul Festivus report, where he exposes government waste. This year, the number is $900 billion in government waste. Unbelievable. But I want you to listen to a report that we've got. We've got a report from Fox News senior congressional correspondent Chad Pergram discussing the Supreme Court decision to reject the clarification that Jack Smith, special counsel, requested. Listen to this.
What the Supreme Court has said, they're not going to hear this on an emergency basis, meaning it's not going to be something that's going to be fast-tracked. This will go through the court system the regular way. It'll go to a federal appeals court first. There will be oral arguments there. They will have to determine what the judgment of that court is, one way or the other. And then there would be probably an appeal by both sides, either side, depending on the verdict there, to the Supreme Court. So this might still take a while to go through the federal court, and if and when it ever goes to the Supreme Court.
So that is the current state of affairs with the request for what's going on with Trump's immunity defense that Jack Smith asked them to clarify very quickly. And they're saying, no, we might clarify it later, but we're not clarifying it right now. That's for sure. So that's that. Now, special counsel Jack Smith, he urged the Supreme Court to bypass the federal appeals court and quickly hear an appeal as to whether former President Donald Trump had immunity in the 2020 election. The filing by Jack Smith came a day after Trump's team, the legal team, met their deadline to answer Smith's first filing on December 11th, urging the Supreme Court for this end to go through the appellate process. Now, the question at hand is whether Trump can be prosecuted on charges that he plotted to overturn the 2020 election or the results of the election, which, again, I think that's every candidate's job is to make sure that they win, right? So if they get a result that they don't win, they want to overturn those results. I think that makes all the sense in the world. That's what Hillary Clinton did. That is what Stacey Abrams did. That's what a number of candidates did. And nobody ever put them in jail. Nobody ever called them insurrectionists. Nobody ever did anything except think that that was normal and appropriate. But yet when Trump does it, it's a big deal. Anyway, Smith wants to keep the March 4th trial date that he has noting that the normal process would put that date in jeopardy, because if this goes through the regular appellate process, they might push that back and the date would be after the election. And that might, favor Trump, right? He's going to run for president and be like, yeah, I've got court later on. But the Trump team has accused Smith of having partisan motivation for the end around of this program, right? They're saying you're trying to end our ability to go through the appellate process. So Smith says that the case will end up before the Supreme Court either way, and they might as well go ahead and do it now, saying, quote, only this court can provide the final word on his immunity defense. And that's what he put in his filing. The right to a speedy trial doesn't exist for the federal government. It's a constitutional right bestowed upon the defendant, former acting U.S. Attorney Matt Whitaker said to Newsmax. That was his quote. So, and for Smith to suggest that somehow his case deserves an expedited trial schedule and then an expedited appeals schedule of bypassing the appeals court is really aggressive and purely political, according to Whitaker, because he says that this is him trying to interfere in the election. I think I agree with that you just got to let nature take its course, just like I said with George Santos, just like I said with anybody else, even Joe Biden, right? You've got to go through the numbers. We can't just go, well, we think everybody's going to agree to impeach Biden, so let's get him out of office. No, you've got to go through the committee process. You've got to bring the articles of impeachment. You've got to do the inquiry. You've got to go through it. It's got to get through the House, then it's got to get to the Senate, and it may not get through the Senate. Everything has a process, and I believe even if you're Joe Biden and you're guilty of sin, you have to go through that process. We can't just take away people's due process rights, whatever the due process is, right? Whether it's a civil, criminal, or political process like impeachment. I think you've got to respect the process. Anyway, Jonathan Turley, he's a legal scholar for Fox News. He weighed in on this, and he says that the Supreme Court rejected this appeal to expedite the Trump immunity case because Jack Smith will obviously go off the cliff if he loses his March date. And it really, that's what it's all about. It's staying on top of being able to derail the election. Listen to this.
I think that part of the dynamic here is that the special counsel was asking to effectively leapfrog over the D.C. Circuit in order to get a judgment as quickly as possible. Jack Smith has made very clear that he wants this case tried before the election. And what a lot of us have said is that it's unlikely that many of the justices have the same sense of urgency, because Trump would be eligible for the presidency even if he were convicted. And regular order demands usually that the court hears from the appellate court. Mm-hmm. Now, the impact of this decision on Smith is going to be anything but good. I mean, the reason he was so insistent on leapfrogging the D.C. Circuit is that he believes that this could end up endangering the March trial date. Now, that date, if you remember, was shoehorned by the court just before Super Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Everything has been frozen since the court looked at this question. So he may indeed lose that March date, and then it's a real problem. You go right over a cliff because this is a very jammed calendar. So it's not clear if he could fit a trial between that date and the election.
Well, there you have it. That's Jonathan Turley. You know what? I think his analysis on this is spot on. He's correct in saying that Jack Smith wants to keep this tight and on track and on schedule so that they can interfere in the election, right? Their goal here is not justice. Their goal is to get Trump off the ballot, to disqualify Trump however they can, to tie him up in litigation. And if this goes beyond the date of the election and something that's later on, well, then they haven't done their job, right? Because, again, they're not pursuing justice. And as sad as that sounds, that's lamentably what we have. So stick around, folks. We're going to continue that conversation. We're going to get into some other things, too. We're also going to talk about how people are managing, right, with the holidays. Some people get really happy this time of year because they're going to get some gifts from their loved ones. Other people get kind of sad and irritable. They might get a little snippy. So we're going to discuss, how do you deal with people that are kind of out of sorts during the holidays? I'm going to get into that as well. Plus your calls and a whole lot more straight ahead. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And again, we're talking about Donald Trump. Today's decision, Supreme Court says they're not going to rule on former President Trump's presidential immunity claim. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court today declined, flat out said, no, we're not doing it, to immediately decide, as was requested by Jack Smith, the special counsel appointed by not so much by President Biden, but more so by Merrick Garland. And that's a whole other topic of conversation that I want to get into. And let me see if I can find something to share with you on that one, because ultimately, this is what's come into question. There was an amicus brief, right? A friend of the court brief by Ed Meese, former United States attorney under Ronald Reagan. And he says, him and several others, they say the special counsel himself is unconstitutional. Right? So what authority does he have? And this is a very interesting argument. And they filed this with the Supreme Court yesterday. So it comes as no surprise to me that the Supreme Court said, no, thank you. We're not taking the bait, Jack Smith. We're not going to take this case as you're requesting, because we don't even know if you're the guy. At least, and that's my inference, right? That's what I'm hearing. But check this out. Former Attorney General Ed Meese, he presented arguments to the Supreme Court that they should reject special counsel Jack Smith's request because he was unconstitutionally appointed in the first place. Now, Meese, along with law professors Stephen G. Calabresi and Gary Lawson, filed a friend of the court brief, or an amicus brief, on Wednesday to present the case that Attorney General Merrick Garland's appointment of Jack Smith, who is a private citizen, is in violation of the Appointments Clause of the Constitution. And this is what they said. Not clothed in the authority of the federal government, Smith is a modern example of a naked emperor. Improperly appointed, he has no more authority to represent the United States in this court than Bryce Harper, Taylor Swift, or Jeff Bezos. The brief was filed in response to Smith's request to the court to expedite former President Donald Trump's case, arguing that presidential immunity for his actions on January 6, 2021, which are connected to the criminal charges brought by Smith. Now, what's interesting here is that Meese argues that the legality of Smith's appointment is sufficient to sink Smith's petition, and the court should definitely deny the review of that petition. Now, former General Meese, he says that him and his crew, these other law professors and scholars, they note in the brief that Mr. Smith was appointed to, quote, conduct the ongoing investigation into whether any person or entity, including former President Donald Trump, violated the law in connection with efforts to interfere with the lawful transfer of power following the 2020 presidential election, or the certification of the Electoral College vote held on or about January 6, 2021. Now, while Garland cited as statutory authority for his appointment, Meese argues that none of those statutes nor any other statutory or constitutional provision remotely authorizes the appointment by the Attorney General of a private citizen to get this type of extraordinary criminal law enforcement power under the title of what they call special counsel. Secondarily, even if one overlooks the absence of the statutory authority for the position, there is no statute specifically authorizing the Attorney General rather than the President, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, to appoint such a special counsel. And again, that's according to General Meese. So under the Appointments Clause, inferior officers can be appointed by department heads only if Congress so directs them by statute, and so directs specifically enough to overcome a clear statement presumption in favor of presidential appointment and senatorial confirmation. No such statute exists right now for the special counsel. And this is the case that they're making. Now, Meese served as President Reagan's Attorney General, and he said the special counsel, if he's a valid officer, great, my computer froze. This is good. By the way, I'm reading this from the New York Post. Very good piece by Brianna Harrelly. But to get back to that spot where I was before this froze, he says that the special counsel, if he is in fact a valid officer, is a superior or principal officer rather than an inferior officer, and thus cannot be appointed by any means other than a presidential appointment and senatorial confirmation, regardless of what any statutes purport to say. Now, earlier this month, Jack Smith asked the Supreme Court to weigh in on this, and they again decided today to say, no, we're not weighing in on anything, at least not now. So Smith wants, obviously, for this thing to go very quickly, and nobody knows how long it's actually going to take to figure this thing out. But the bottom line is that former Attorney General of the United States, Edwin Meese, and a couple of law professors, law scholars, they all agree. Smith was appointed by Garland and made a special counsel. He was given all of the authority that a United States attorney would have, but Garland doesn't have the right to do that. Biden has the right to do that, but he can only do it if he appoints him and names him. Now, people would say, but we've had special counsels before. We have. However, the scope is limited, and the independent counsel statute that once existed has sunsetted, doesn't exist anymore. So, is the question. Is Jack Smith even a legitimate prosecutor in this case? Does he even have the authority to do what he's trying to do? These guys are arguing no. I tend to think that Ed Meese and these other scholars that have signed on to this note, I think they know what they're talking about. It makes sense to me. And that might be why the Supreme Court said, we're not going to do this right now. Because I think even they doubt the validity of Jack Smith's office. Let's see what happens. Folks, anyway, we're going to continue with our talk on the holiday blues and more. Don't go anywhere. I am Rich Valdez.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And with the end of the holidays fast approaching, many people find themselves dreading going back to the day-to-day grind, even if they experience stress over the holidays. And again, it's we're days away from, my culture, Puerto Ricans, Americans of Puerto Rican descent. We celebrate New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve the same way, right? You wait till midnight and then you party. So there's no opening presents in the morning. We open presents at midnight, and it's a lot of fun. And with us being days away from that, there's obviously some stress that goes with it. I've in the past been very stressed out at certain family events, not so much anymore. I've learned this wonderful thing called mindfulness, and it really does help, honestly. But there's a lot of people that are stressed out during the holidays, and people do become very depressed or anxious. They feel a lack of something or other. For me, for many years, it was a lack of my parents being around because they're gone now. And Dr. Debra Mandel understands how this works. She's a psychologist, and she's written a number of books around the scenarios like these. Her latest is called Sassy and Rude, A New Attitude, and it takes a closer look at how to relate with adult daughters and the tough love and approach that you need to mend those fences. And what's interesting is I happen to have adult daughters, so obviously I gravitate toward a topic like this. Dr. Mandel joins us right now to give us some helpful advice on beating the post-holiday blues, the pre-holiday blues, and to bring in a positive outlook for the new year. Dr. Debra Mandel, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. Wow, everything you said you're right on. And just everybody should take that word mindfulness right now and just write it down, because that is one of the key things that we will talk about. Do you want to go with the pre-holiday life first, since we're right up at that edge, or you want to talk about post
I would love
first?
that. I'd love that. And I just want to preface what I said with the idea that for a long time I struggled with being very very short-tempered, and I would read that I needed to be mindful, but I was like, I just don't know how to do that. How do I manage to remember stuff when I'm in the midst of being angry, in the throes of rage and anger or disappointment or whatever it was? And for me, it took losing someone of significant position in my life where they were just like, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I was like, oh shoot.
Aww.
And it was that loss that made me think, do I really need to be a jerk that's that short-tempered all the time? And it makes you really forces yourself to reevaluate things. And when that happens, it's very eye-opening. And but for that, I probably would not have realized the lesson of being able to dig deep and, actually, count to 10, do the 4-4-4 breathing, whatever. Just really focus on what you've got rather than what you don't have. So, Doc, walk us through it. What is it like? What do you recommend for people that are going into, the next couple of days, these holiday events? What say you?
Yes. And first of all, I would say watch for your expectations, whether those are known expectations or more under the blanket expectations. We all have them. It's part of human nature. We have expectations of how people are supposed to behave, how we're supposed to behave, how the world is supposed to happen. And most of us get disappointed, particularly when we have unspoken or unconscious expectations. So expectations are resentments under construction and a sure recipe for disappointments. So we want to try to keep our expectations reasonable, right? So we're walking into this holiday season right now, and it's already been there. We've got Hanukkah that's just passed, and so people have been in this for quite a while, and there's a lot of expectations going on. We see this in our Hallmark commercials, the Hallmark movies. We see this in the different cards that are out there, and everything is supposed to be peachy keen and dandy. And for most of us, it's not that way. For most of us, we're going to have a little bit of dread about some of the events that may be coming up. We're going to see some family members or friends that maybe we don't really consider to be friends anymore, or wouldn't really pick them as our family members. So we can have a lot of stress that comes our way with that. So again, expectations are really important to monitor those. And the other is to give up perfectionism. That is one thing that shows up for so many people as to why they end up having so much more difficulty after the holidays, is because we expect ourselves to have these ideal standards of how we're supposed to be. And most of us can never live up to that. And you know that saying, you can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. It's so true. And yet we run around circles on the freeways. Oh, you talking about irritability. Have you noticed how much road rage there is right now?
Mm-hmm.
People trying to get in and out of parking structures, and we have all this news out there that's very upsetting to people, and so people are just on high stress. So it's really important to spend some good quality time with oneself before entering into these activities, and just do some deep breathing, do some reconnection with what your core values are, what is it that you're really hoping to accomplish, and be compassionate and empathetic, both of yourself and of others, because other people are struggling also.
You know, Doc, I think these are all great points. And for so many people, I think they go into this and they just want to have a good time, right? They want to have a good time. They don't want to fight during the holidays or holiday dinners or whatever it is. But I feel like I know in my situation, when I go to certain family functions, there's always just a family member or a couple of family members, people that rub you the wrong way. And for years, what I've done is try to just say, well, I know so-and-so is going to rub me the wrong way, so I just need to prepare myself for that and kind of eat it, or kind of prepare myself for, that and just figure out how to endure it. And for me, things didn't change until I realized that I really had a lot of choices here. And I didn't realize how many choices I had. I thought I just had to deal with this. I had to kind of swallow it and move on to avoid the conflict. But I think in many cases, you don't have to avoid the conflict altogether. I think you can really, it really depends on your perspective of the situation, at least for what I've learned, for me. And when I realized that I could get angry, or I could say, I've got a chance here, an opportunity, a choice to do things differently, to kill them with kindness, or to do something else, to choose not to get angry, to choose not to get slighted, to choose not to feel the way I have felt in the past. And when I don't feel slighted, I don't get these explosive eruptions of emotion where I'm just like, screw you. I'm just like, all right, whatever, cool. And it's a lot easier to be calm and relaxed and chill, if you will, when you choose how you're going to respond. But that took me forever to learn. And I'm wondering, what can you say in that regard to help listeners understand that they too can achieve that?
You're 100% accurate. And one of the themes in all of my books, including my recent Sassy and Rude, Her New Attitude, mostly for mothers and daughters, but for all relationships, one of the biggest things is being accountable for our own feelings, actions, and reactions, and not holding on to that over which we have no control. Because so many of us are working our lives trying to be in control of that which we cannot control. And so it's really important, one, is to understand that our feelings come from our interpretations of our perceptions of events. So how we choose to feel about something ultimately is how we choose to interpret that which we see. So bringing it back to the family gathering or some event that may be coming up, and you're sitting with somebody who you think is difficult. Now you can allow that person to rub you the wrong way, or you can say, wait a second, what I see here is somebody who's also in distress. This is that person's only way of managing and coping with that. And I can either be loving and kind, or I can take it personally and be reactive and possibly even antagonistic or aggressive in return. And actually, it turns into a combustible situation rather than something where I could actually calm it down and say something simple and kind, like, wow, it sounds like, that's a really difficult experience for you, or it sounds like you're really struggling and I'm sorry for your tension, but I really am here to have a good time, so I'd love it if we could try to lighten this up a little bit. There's things we can say to people that take care of our own selves with good boundaries where we're still compassionate toward others, and that's really key. So keeping in mind that how we interpret something is what yields our feelings, and we can change our interpretations, and therefore we can change our feelings and our emotions.
Outstanding. Doc, I want you to stick with us. We're on with Dr. Debra Mandel. She's a psychologist and the author of Sassy and Rude. That's Her New Attitude. That's the full title of the book, Sassy and Rude, Her New Attitude. And we're going to talk a little bit about the book in an upcoming segment. But straight ahead, I want to talk a little bit about what you just talked about, which was that choice that one makes and how to diffuse these potential things. Because I think oftentimes people feel like those aren't my words, right? Those are your words, and you're the psychologist. But I don't really talk that way. And oftentimes I think people feel like they're in conflict and they just don't know what to say. and they need those words. They need the right way to say something. Oftentimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. People perceive things a certain way, and then, they take it the wrong way. And I think it's important to be armed with the right tools. So, folks, stick around. We're coming right back with Dr. Debra Mandel discussing her new book, Sassy and Rude, Her New Attitude. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, familia, welcome back. Amigos, we're on with Dr. Debra Mandel. She's a psychologist and the author of the new book, Sassy Rude. Excuse me, I messed it up. Take two. Sassy Rude, Her New Attitude. You can get that on Amazon.com. It's an excellent book from what I can see. I have not read it, but so far it sounds like it really tackles things that are important, because I've met a number of people over the last year or two or three that, people always talk about daddy issues, but there's also a lot to be said for mommy issues, right? Daughters that have certain issues with their mom that are not really catastrophic issues, but can have catastrophic consequences if they go unresolved. But before we get into that, I want to get into how to handle these moments where one needs to be mindful, and something that we left off on before the break. And Dr. Debra Mandel, you'd mentioned a couple of things that were really good about trying to diffuse things with people that are somewhat challenging or difficult. And again, it's, for me, I've learned this is a matter of perspective, right? Depending on how you look at it. But please continue.
Oh, of course. And you had mentioned earlier, right before we took the break, of tone of voice is so critical, right? If we're coming from a loving and kind-hearted place, and that shows up in our body language and in our tone of voice, then our message, we can say a lot of things that may be difficult to hear, but it's going to be much better received than if we come from a place of anger, hostility, feeling personally attacked, acting like a victim, like, how dare you, as opposed to, again, coming from the point of reference that this person is probably struggling with their own stuff. In the same way, when you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off, you can yell at them, scream at them, and chase after them, or you can take a pause and say, I bet that person's having a bad day. Or they're so preoccupied that they didn't notice, but you know what? I'm just going to role model calm and serene behavior. So also, when we're in a situation that could potentially be volatile, and we can take it down a notch ourselves through our breathing and through, again, just being accountable for our own actions, not trying to control someone else's, we can de-escalate a situation just because calm tends to beget more calm, just as aggression tends to beget more aggression. So you choose, right? Again, it becomes our choice. And it's that taking responsibility for our own behavior that is so critical in these situations. And by the way, if you're the one who puts your foot in your mouth, or you've had that extra glass of wine and you say something kind of dumb, you always have an opportunity to heal that by calling that person later on or saying, you know what, I was out of line. I'm so sorry about that. Please forgive me. Taking ownership of that tends to soften people. And that's a really big theme in all of my books.
Outstanding. And I want to get into the latest book, Sassy and Rude, Her New Attitude, because I think this is a topic that personally I've seen with a lot of things. I have two daughters. They occasionally have a contentious relationship with me. They occasionally have a contentious relationship with their mom. And I'd say probably comes up with their mom more often than me, just because they kind of always grew up being daddy's little girls. And their mom was always very, tough. But I realize that this is an ongoing thing. I've met a lot of people that have had very tough moms growing up, and it's a thing, right? And I think your book kind of addresses this in part where you talk about, bridging the gap between moms and daughters. What inspired you to write this book?
Quite frankly, my own challenges with my daughter over the course of her teens and young adulthood, and we still have our trials and tribulations, and then along with hundreds of mother-daughter duos who have come in and out of my practice, where I've really learned to fine-tune my understanding of that dynamic. And by the way, one of the critical aspects of this is that know that just because it's written for mothers and daughters, so many of these tools and applications can go with anybody, fathers and sons, fathers and daughters, mothers and sons, just our relationships in general, because the basic through line of the book is, again, what am I responsible for? What have I done that may have caused some of these concerns? And understanding that if my daughter sees me in a certain way and I see her in a certain way, as we both may see each other as the sassy and rude one, even though it's written primarily for the moms, but it's also for daughters who are also scratching their head going, why is my mom such a BI? You know where I'm going with that. And so we're not saying that on air, but that concern and comment comes up in our head sometimes. So it's really about trying to understand how old wounds may have been created. And one of the things I talk about is being the too nice mom, because we have this thing called pendulum parenting, where a lot of people in my generation, we were raised with a heavy hand. Our parents, our moms in particular, did not cut us any slack. It's like, you do what you're told. You're supposed to be seen and not heard, and do as I say, not as I do. All those messages that we heard. And for many people, it was very strict, and it was not about your creativity. And many of us have gone way overboard. Now we don't want it to be the most loving mom on the planet, give our daughters everything that we didn't get, have her feel so loved that we failed to set good boundaries. And so we want to also be mindful of boundaries. So the theme of the book, though, is about healing those old wounds, inviting an olive branch to your daughter, and encouraging her to do the same with you, where you take accountability and responsibility for the ways in which you may have had your shortcomings fail one another, and then be able to have a dialogue that's very loving and kind and get through that, that rude. And the whole idea of the book is bring back the sugar and spice in your not so nice adult daughter. That's actually the subtitle. So it's a very
I want to get into that with you. I got to take a pause right here. It's the wonder of live radio. Folks, we're on with Debra Mandel. She's a PhD, a psychologist, and she's the author of Sassy and Rude, Her New Attitude. And we're going to discuss what she's talking about right now, because I think you're giving us a great overview, and that's great. It's kind of like the back of the book. I want to get into a little bit about the interior, the meat and potatoes of this, because I think this is so important when you're talking about being too nice, the too nice parent, or old wounds. I think there's a lot of people listening right now that because they were raised with that heavy hand, they're like, what's an old wound? I have nothing but old wounds. I'm supposed to heal the old wound? Nobody's ever thought about healing the old wound for many people in the Gen X and Boomer generation. So I want to dig into that a little bit as well. Folks, don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
America, welcome back. We continue our conversation with the author of Sassy and Rude, Her New Attitude, Dr. Debra Mandel. And what's interesting here, Doc, is you mentioned a few things, and we're going to dig deep. We won't have a ton of time in this particular segment, but you mentioned old wounds. And I got to tell you, being a brute of a man, right, I didn't know anything about wounds until, like 6 months ago. I started reading about this, and I realized, oh, my gosh, people are injured, like, for the long term by words, incidents, occurrences that happen in their childhood and other places. And it affects their entire adulthood and their entire relationship with certain people, including their parents. So I want to dig into that with you. Stick with us, Dr. Debra Mandel, author of Sassy and Rude. You got to get a couple of copies of this book before Christmas. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back. Hour number 2, Don't Move a Muscle. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the program, hour number 2. If you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, feel free to give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And again, a couple little rundown on some headlines here. Senator Rand Paul released his annual Festivus report, which exposed $900 billion in government waste. We'll go through that at the top of the next hour. The Supreme Court of the United States declined to expedite the request by the special counsel, Jack Smith, to review the immunity debate in the 2020 election case involving former President Trump. We've also got President Biden pardoning all federal marijuana use charges. We'll get to that in a little bit as well. And we were talking with Dr. Debra Mandel about her book, Sassy and Rude, discussing, what types of old wounds, childhood wounds might exist, what those are, for those of you who've never heard this terminology, and how you navigate around these offenses that may have, bent you out of shape way back when, that are still affecting you. Sometimes you don't even know what it was or how it happened or whatnot. And you just know that there was this instance that you were displeased, and you move forward in life around that and dealing with things that way. And there's a better way. And she's written this book called Sassy and Rude, Her New Attitude. And it's framed from the position of a daughter and a mom, but it really works with any relationship. And as we go into the holidays, as we go into Christmas, and we just wrapped up Hanukkah, where people are gathering, they're around the table, we're going into New Year's, there's going to be a lot of activities, right? There's a lot of celebration, and they can go well, they can be mundane, or they could be disastrous, depending on how you view this stuff. So I want to continue our conversation there, and in particular drill down on what these wounds are like, how they happen, and how people can deal with them. Dr. Debra Mandel, welcome back.
Thank you so much. On the break, I was giving a little thought to this, and I thought it might be nice for your audience to hear that I'm a very relatable person here. So I'll share a little bit of my own personal story. My mom was very much a perfectionist. She was not raised with parents much of her own. They were quite abusive. She was on her own at an early age. She migrated from Estonia to Sweden to Canada, and then she was a model, and she met my dad. She was very young. He was older. She did not know what the heck she was doing, and they moved to California and had children, and her whole life became about being a mom, though she didn't really want to be a mom. She had given up her career, so she actually had a lot of animosity toward that role, and it kind of came out in the ways of very perfectionistic, very heavy-handed, very harsh with her words. If I left a drink cup, like a cup of water on the table, and went off to go do something for a minute and came back, the cup was gone, cleaned up, and the scowl on her face was, "How could you leave that for me to do?" kind of thing. So I just became this relentless mommy pleaser. I did everything I could, straight A's, A+. No matter what I did, you were as good as your last A, right? Now, what have you done lately? I saved my money for her Mother's Day gifts and all that stuff. And I just did that over and over and over again for years until I kind of became a petulant, acting out teenager, but not at home. I just went off on my own path. So I definitely have that experience. I want people to understand that this is not just from clinical knowledge and not just from book reading, but truly a personal experience. And when I had children, my one daughter actually, I decided I am not going to make those mistakes. I'm going to give her so much love, shower her with so much that I could possibly give to her so she always feels good about herself. And you know what? It was just unrealistic because I also failed to set some really important boundaries. I kind of caved in and gave in to just about everything. And so it didn't do her much good either because she didn't really know what the boundaries were. She didn't really know what the limits were. It was just a very permissive experience. So we would later on have our own conflicts. And so I wrote this book inspired a lot by that experience, as well as, again, like I said earlier, of a lot of the clients that I've worked with over the years. And you said something earlier about, people can say a lot of words that are harsh, but people say words are just words. But no, sticks and stones can break my bones and words can never hurt me is just a crock. It's not true.
Yeah.
The words that are spoken to us, particularly when we're young and vulnerable, can have a very lasting effect. So there are so many things that can cause deep emotional wounds: neglect, abandonment, just disinterest, overall disinterest in the child, or, the severe cases of abuse, of course, but even just not being able to please a parent, seeing that they're just not happy with you can be very scarring. Now, some people just brush that off and they bounce right off of it and say whatever and they carry on. But for others, it has a very deep toll on their inner self and their self-value. And they have what I call a sensitive heart. So that sensitivity ends up being kind of clouded. Instead of feeling good about one's sensitivity, it feels like it's a curse. It feels like it's something bad. And that can breed a sense of victimization and then not really thriving in life. So this book is really about the step-by-step process of getting rid of blame and shame, taking ownership and responsibility for one's self and one's actions, making amends where amends can be, identifying what kind of too nice mom are you. I've got the nervous Nellie, I've got perfectionistic Pia, I've got 5 different types, I've got different types of sassy and rude daughters, and it's really not about labeling. That's kind of the fun part, just because people relate to that. But It's really about diving in deep and digging into those wounds and understanding where they came from and doing these sugar and spice exercises that are all throughout the book about how to make amends, how to make things right, how to encourage your daughter to come forth and share with you the things that she may be holding on to. So you have this open dialogue and eventually can create this beautiful healing tree.
Doc, as I'm hearing you say that, it sounds to me like there's a lot in the book, and people should definitely pick up a copy of the book, Sassy and Rude, Her New Attitude. You can get it on Amazon. Order it now. You'll have it in time for Three Kings Day. You'll probably get it just a couple of days past Christmas. And I always recommend getting a couple, one for yourself and one for someone else. But what I'm hearing you discuss, it sounds like these things that you've described that could happen when you're a child can have an impact on your self-worth. They could have an impact on how you relate to people in the future. I've recently been doing some reading and had a different psychologist on the show that was discussing attachment styles. And I had no idea such a thing existed. And some of what you said made me think back to that conversation where this could inform and create these unhealthy or insecure attachment styles, which could plague people forever. And it kind of tricks them into thinking they like somebody when they don't really like somebody. They like the particular attachment style, which is a fascinating concept to me.
Yes, we tend to recreate that which is most familiar to us, hoping for a different outcome. Doesn't make any sense, but it's what we do. So if we had a disinterested parent, a parent who we could never please, then we will tend to flock toward people in our lives who we cannot please, hoping, again, that we can have vindication somehow or another. I'm going to do it right this time, and this person is going to give me that endless praise that I feel that I really desire and crave. But it's not really what's so. And so we have to heal those wounds internally as best we can, so we make ourselves whole. Rather than having those HOLEs, we make ourselves WHOLE by giving ourselves the validation, the acknowledgement, the appreciation, all those things that we look for in someone else. We take ownership that it becomes our job to do that. Of course, other people in our lives are a bonus pack, right? You want people in your life who are kind to you and generous and thoughtful and caring and empathetic, but we don't seek those people out because oftentimes if we don't have that for ourselves, we're a magnet for more of the same. So we may treat, oftentimes they say victims and perpetrators go together because the victim is finding the perpetrator is finding the victim, and the victim can become the perpetrator. It just becomes this very corrupt balance, if you will, in the psyche that doesn't really get us anyplace. We want to really heal those wounds so they don't wreak havoc in our lives, so that they don't come out in destructive ways, either toward others or towards ourselves. That's often what I see in my practice, is people who turn those negative thoughts against themselves. So rather than being angry or hurt by the people who may have actually legitimately hurt them, they hurt themselves, they harm themselves, they become suicidal, or they don't practice self-care, they do self-destructive behaviors, compulsive shopping, compulsive eating, all those things that we're all familiar with. So it's really about internal healing and forgiveness. It's about loving one another. There's a little phrase I want to say that was really meaningful to me that my daughter brought to me last year. She's a very a free-flowing spirit gal.
Sure.
And she alerted me to this. It's a practice actually based in Hawaii that is called Ho'oponopono. And it's a little prayer, if you will. And what it means is, I'm sorry, forgive me, thank you, I love you.
It's interesting how life is really that simple, right?
when you it can be, but we complicate it.
Right.
Yes,
right.
We do.
And so much of that can be learned. In your book, I think you explain a lot of this stuff from what I'm reading in the description. And I want to urge a lot of people to get this book, Sassy and Rude, Her New Attitude. It sounds like a life changer for a lot of people. Dr. Debra Mandel, PhD, is the author. Doc, let everybody know how they could get a copy of the book and how they could follow you, whether it's social media or your website.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, first of all. I just want to make sure that
My
I said
pleasure.
that, because I'm so appreciative, and I'm so appreciative of
Likewise.
the praise and diving in deeply to this piece of work that's so important to me. It's such an important, hopefully to your audience as well. Yes, you can find me at drdebraonline.com, DRDEBRA online.com. The book is available at retailers and on all your favorite online sellers. Amazon.com, of course, is one of the places many people go, but there are others as well. And my social media, all my connectors are on my website, and you can find me. I won't even go off and list all those because that takes too much time. But if you want to find me, you'll find me. And I appreciate feedback very much, by the way. So I really do welcome people to contact me, give me your feedback about the show, give me your feedback about the book. You can always post a review on Amazon. I really appreciate that a lot. And I really hope that this message of tough love, but also it's really a gentle journey about letting go of that blame, shame game and just finding accountability, ownership, and love.
Outstanding. Dr. Debra Mandel, she's the author of Sassy and Rude. I recommend you get a couple of copies of the book and check out her website, drdebraonline.com. That's DRDEBRA online.com. And Doc, I want to welcome you back next year at some point, maybe in January or February, to do a little bit more of a deep dive, not just into this book, but maybe some of the past topics you've discovered, because I think this is a part of life that it's very new to me. I just didn't know this existed. I was raised by two very tough Puerto Rican parents and thought that's just how life was. And as I'm an adult now and both my parents are gone and I see my kids and they're bringing things to me and they're like, why don't you do this? And I'm like, we don't do it like that. But I'm realizing we can do it like that. It's just because I didn't doesn't mean we can't. And there are things that we can do. And at the end of the day, if it helps the situation, then why wouldn't we improve relationships with our loved ones? So I want to thank you for being with us and for putting this book together. Godspeed to you. Happy New Year.
Oh, thank you so much. And remember that vulnerability is our strength. So hold on to that.
Amen to that. Dr. Debra Mandel, check her out at drdebraonline.com. Folks, straight ahead, we're going to continue with more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Mr. Valdez, you have one of the greatest shows that radio has ever had.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-8790. 833-4-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
The most important poll released in the last 20 years came out stating that 20% of the mail-in ballots in the 2020 presidential election were rigged or defective. It was the Rasmussen poll, highly respected. That means that the election was a giant scam. You cannot have a fair and honest election as long as there are mail-in ballots involved. Cheating will always be prevalent. France and many other countries have stopped the madness. They got rid of their mail-in votes. The Republican Party must do something now. They have to work, they have to stick together, and they have to fight, because the Democrats cheat. They cheat like nobody has ever cheated before. It's a disgrace.
That is former President Donald Trump beating around the bush. Just kidding. It couldn't have been more clear and more direct, right? He always says what's on his mind. And this comes on the heels of a federal judge in West Virginia rejecting a bid on Thursday. So yesterday, late yesterday, to remove former President Trump from the state's ballot like they did in Colorado. But West Virginia said, no, we're not doing it. District Judge Irene Berger ruled that John Anthony Castro, the candidate who filed a lawsuit against President Trump, lacked the standing to sue. And she sided with attorneys for President Trump, the Secretary of State, Mac Warner, and the West Virginia Republican Party to dismiss Mr. Castro's suit. U.S. District Judge Irene Berger wrote that the evidence that Mr. Castro submitted removes any doubt that Mr. Castro's purported campaign exists as a vehicle for pursuing litigation, not votes, adding that he could not prove any political activity in the state aside from the lawsuit that he actually filed. Now, Mr. Castro, who's based out of Texas, had filed at least 24 lawsuits against former President Trump to remove him from respective states' ballots in recent weeks. Earlier this month, a judge in Arizona dismissed a similar lawsuit. His lawsuit argued that President Trump should be disbarred because of Section 3. Sound familiar? You got it. The Section 3 of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution stipulates that anyone who engaged in an insurrection against the United States cannot be a presidential candidate. Now, of course, the big obvious question and elephant in the room here is that Trump was never charged with insurrection, nor was he convicted of insurrection. So being that everybody wants to say he's an insurrectionist, it's interesting how they've never charged him with such a crime. Anyway, the U.S. Supreme Court declined in October to hear the appeal of a similar case that Mr. Castro brought in Florida. And a court in Orlando recently ruled that former President Trump, under the judge's reading of the provision, cannot appear on the state's ballots, although the case is likely going to be appealed to the Supreme Court. The Colorado case, however, was not brought by Mr. Castro, but by a left-wing activist group called CREW, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics, in Washington, and headed by a board member who currently serves on the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Advisory Council. So we'll keep you up to speed with that, but it seems like Trump keeps winning these cases, minus the one in Colorado. Anyway, we're coming right back to your calls and more. We're going to get Open Phone America started very shortly. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere.
Congratulations on just an amazing show. I know you've worked so hard in the industry and nobody deserves it more than you do. So I'm happy to see you really succeeding here. It's awesome.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. It's Rich Valdez. Happy to be here with you as we wind down the year. We're getting close to Christmas, or I celebrate with my family Noche Buena, which is New Year's Eve. For a lot of our friends have different traditions, right? In Noche Buena, we eat a lot of pork and rice with chickpeas and drink the spiked eggnog. It's fantastic, by the way, and the roasted pork shoulder, and it's just a phenomenal time with lots of different cuisine. And there are these I don't even know what they're called. They're called pasteles, right? I don't know what they are in English, but they're made out of like ground up plantain with pork on the inside, and they're wrapped in a banana leaf, and they're boiled, and very similar to the Mexican tamale or the Cuban tamale. But the Puerto Rican pasteles are fantastic, and it's just quite a gastronomic experience, honestly. And it really typically only comes once a year, where you get to indulge in all these different fun traditional foods, and I love it. I love it. But here we are, days away from that, and then a few more days away from 2024. And just to think it's finally here, right? We're going to have the first primaries very, very soon. We're going to have New Year's Eve very, very soon. For those that celebrate New Year's Eve, that's happening very soon. I mean, just a lot going on. And at the end of every year, Senator Rand Paul always releases something called a Festivus report. And last year, I remember we talked about it. And this year, he's exposing $900 billion in government squander. And this is some pretty interesting stuff, because he really nails people. But he goes from funding the A-list to money for the Egyptians in their tourism. And it's just always eye-opening. And I love, just alluding to that, because it's important, right? It's important for us to, I think, keep an eye on how important things are in our government. It's important for us to see where there's waste, where there's fraud, there's abuse. And Congressman Chip Roy, outside of what Rand Paul did, he tends to really call it like it is. And earlier today, he was saying that the Republican Party needs to go on the offense on another big squandered failure, and that is the southern border. I mean, I think everybody's in agreement. I was at a little dinner party prior to coming on the air, so maybe I come on at 10 Eastern. I was probably there from like 6 or not 6, more like almost 8 o'clock at night to about 9 or so for a little while, maybe 7:30, 7:45. And so I was there for like an hour and a half. And the point of the story is that I'm talking with a lot of people and having conversation, and it was great. And I was there with a elected official from a small town in New Jersey, a former restaurant owner who's a friend of mine, Cuban guy. The other guy's Puerto Rican, Dominican. And we're all just, having a good time talking. And, of course, people are beating me up. They're like, oh, because Richie likes to talk about politics, and he's a Trump guy, and blah, blah, blah. And both of these guys looked at me, and they said, well, listen, when it comes to the border, nobody's better than Trump on that issue. And I just thought that was interesting. I wasn't even bringing up the politics of it. I wasn't bringing up anything. But they brought it up, and they brought it up saying, we need to shut the border, shut down the border. It was plain and simple. Both from, again, an elected official in a small town, and from a former restaurateur who's a friend of mine who was hosting the party. And I just thought it's very interesting how people really want to go with Trump when they didn't want Trump before. So whether it's Chip Roy talking about shutting down the border, or people on the street in the Bronx that are saying, you know what, we've got to do better. We can't mess around with Biden anymore. We can't afford it. It's important for us to notice that there's a shift going on in the body politic. I want you to listen to Congressman Chip Roy Go right ahead.
Dan Patrick is 100% right. The lieutenant governor is completely correct. We should be shipping folks to other parts of the country, as Greg Abbott did that last year. My friend Governor DeSantis sent a plane full of people who are here illegally to Martha's Vineyard. That was important. And, you know, on the political dynamic, Republicans need to go on offense on this, because this is something that is critical to our national security, and we can win on this. And it's something that not only can we win politically, we can win for the American people if we'll stand up and fight. But it's going to take all of us to go say we're going to hold the line on funding of government and on Ukraine to demand change out of this administration, because they're blatantly ignoring the laws, using asylum and parole to completely consume it. We passed H.R. 2, and people throw that around like, oh, that's a crazy bill. You know what you just talked about on Title 42? Right. That was a health code COVID provision. We got H.R. 29, my bill, to say turnaway authority should be fully in place. Okay. We got that embedded into H.R. 2 to give them the power to turn away. Yep. The White House doesn't want to use it because they want to endanger us and have open borders.
This is exactly what we see going on over and over again. You've got a handful of people that are really interested in trying to defend the indefensible, trying to keep the border wide open. And again, I used to take exception to the terminology of open border, because I felt like, you know, nobody's really advocating for an open border. They're just not doing a good job of securing the border. But I have to say, I think that there are people advocating for an open border. I think there are people that are looking to undermine the sovereignty of this country for whatever reason. And it's not good enough, in my opinion, right? You got to stick with America. Anyway, we're going to continue with our discussion on what's important. And we got some audio from, again, another news, man on the street news interview where people are asked point blank, what do you think about Joe Biden? And their responses are incredibly telling. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, familia, welcome back. America, again, you heard the phone number, 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337, and we're going to get to your calls shortly. Open Phone America is going to start a little bit earlier than usual because we're just minutes away anyway. But I wanted to, before we get into that, I want to play a clip of my friend, my colleague, Cara Castronova. She's a correspondent with Newsmax TV, and she conducted a man on the street interview a couple of weeks ago, and I played that for you. But she's done it again, and she's got more material, if you will, more content that she's getting. And again, to me, it's proving time and again that every time she goes out there and she hits these streets, the responses she gets are very candid, they're very honest, and they're very real. Listen to this.
If President Trump came here to the South Bronx, would you attend the rally?
Of course. I would want to meet Trump. I want to shake his hand.
He's the only president that I see that can ever make America great again. He's capable of doing that.
I would love to go to a rally with Donald Trump come, because I'm a big Donald Trump supporter, and I will support him 100%.
Oh, yeah, definitely we're going to show him love. We're going to show him a lot of love, and, you know, like they do in other states. We definitely need to see Trump here.
There's nothing but love for Donald Trump here in the South Bronx, the North Bronx, the East Bronx, and the West Bronx.
So, you tell me...
We want Trump to come back, please, bro. Biden, get out of here, bro.
I would definitely come to a Trump rally in the South Bronx. I like him.
You do?
Yes.
Yes, I will come to a rally if President Trump was to come to the Bronx, and I also would bring other people to come too and support him.
Would Joe Biden get a warm reception if he came to the Bronx?
No, he wouldn't have, and I'll make sure of that.
All right. And again, Trump is mulling a 2024 election rally in the South Bronx in an attempt to turn the Empire State red. This is according to a piece in the New York Post. And speaking of the Bronx, I am remiss, or I would be remiss, if I didn't acknowledge my colleague from the Bronx, New York, Lydia Serrani. Lydia Serrani is an old friend of mine, broadcasting friend, and she hosted the show yesterday. I trust that you guys enjoyed her sitting in for me, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank her. But in her neck of the woods, in the Bronx, Trump is thinking of putting together a rally there. And I hadn't even seen this in the news, honestly. This was sent to me via text by John McLaughlin, one of the pollsters for the president. And I thought, wow, that's pretty remarkable, interesting stuff. But anyway, former President Trump is in talks for a blowout rally in the South Bronx in a bid to court black voters and turn the Empire State red in the 2024 election. That's according to the New York Post. Trump was in a discussion about a rally with the New York Young Republicans with Gavin Wax. I was with Gavin Wax last night at Councilwoman Vicky Palladino's Christmas party for the Whitestone Republican Club. And these are movers and shakers, I got to tell you. These people put stuff together. And Trump said he likes the idea. He wants the club to lead it. And he says we have a large Hispanic caucus. I'm actually part of that Hispanic caucus. And a large black caucus that could lead the way, according to Gavin Wax, the president of the New York Young Republican Club. And the two of them spoke for about 30 minutes at the gala that happened, let's say that was on the 9th of December. Trump praised Gavin Wax during his official remarks to the guests, and he should be praised. He's done a great job with this club, and he's been on this program before. He's a really smart kid, and I say kid because he's like under 30, and is doing a lot more than many people over 30. So kudos to him. But I would love to see El Trompito come to the Bronx, right? And I think that would be pretty cool. It reminds me of Ronald Reagan going to Jersey City, right? Launching his campaign in Jersey City. So we'll see if that happens, if it doesn't happen, how it happens, when it happens. But let's just wait and see what goes on. And with respect to the group in Queens, another great group, that is the Whitestone Republican Club, where Councilwoman Vicky Palladino hails from. She's terrific. Let me tell you, this woman ran for the state Senate. She was an activist and an opinionated activist, and some political people came to her and said, hey, listen, you should run for the state Senate. And she said, why? And they said, no, because you could probably win. She ran, and she knew she wasn't going to win, but she knew she could make a dent. And she lost, but she made that dent. And she started to work on that dent and put her foot in it and widen it out and make it bigger. And the next thing you know, she ran for a city council seat, and she won. And then she won again. And now she's at her first full re-election, and won with not just a victory, but I would say an electoral mandate. 21% win for a Republican, a conservative Trump Republican in Queens. How about that? New York City. Remarkable. But it goes to show you that Republicans can still win. Not every election is stolen. If you can get a firebrand Republican like Vicky Palladino elected to the New York City Council, and again, she's a dear friend. I support her 100%. But if you can get somebody who's no holds barred, telling it like it is, and get them elected, then it goes to show me that the system is not as corrupt as people want to make it look. It's just not that bad. Republicans can win elections. Period. The end. Punto y final. So I just want to impress that upon you, because I think we need people to do everything, right? You need people to be skeptical. You need people to be optimistic, all of the above. But at the end of the day, we need people, and that's how you win these things. Anyway, there is more to come straight ahead. We're just getting started. Hour number 3 is coming right around the corner. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, we're getting ready for Open Phone America, the third and final hour of the program. Again, I am Rich Valdez here with you till 1 a.m. Eastern Time. If you're catching us on delay, thank you for listening to the show. If you're catching us live, feel free to give us a call, 833-482-5337. If you want to weigh in, now's your chance. We're talking about all the topics we've discussed tonight, plus whatever you want to bring to the table. It's that kind of party over here. Always happy to speak with you, 833-4-VALDEZ. And, last night I took the night off. I've never actually had a guest host come in before because I love being with you guys, my audience. I really do. But Lydia Serran and I did a great job hanging out with you guys last night and having the conversation that had to be had. But I was in a conga line. I was in a conga line with a bunch of Republicans in Queens, New York City. And what was remarkable is a couple of years back, Vicky Palladino and the Whitestone Republican Club had a Christmas party, but it was during COVID. And they were widely criticized for having a conga line, and people had their hands on the shoulders of the person in front of them. And they were, there was physical contact. People were dancing. And it was just, a big deal at the time. People were freaking out, and they said, it was a super spreader. This is horrible. She's evil. All sorts of criticism. And last night, as I was making my way through the restaurant in the conga line, all I could think was, how interesting, how funny, how cool of an event where, it was the end of the world a couple of years ago, but now everybody was enjoying themselves. Nobody's being critical. And it made me thankful. It made me very thankful for just the country that we're in, that even though a bunch of crazy lefties pulled the wool over our eyes and fooled us, we bounced back. We bounced back, and we didn't lose sight of liberty. We didn't lose sight of what it means to be an American, and we didn't lose sight of doing what's right. And I'm glad that we haven't. I'm glad that people held on to their common sense. I'm glad that people are still involved and getting more involved, because that's what we need to do. We need to be involved, right? On my podcast, This is America with Rich Valdez, I always end it with a couple of quotes that are usually attributed to Lord Acton and others. But I always remind people that you have to stand for something, because if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. And the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people like you to sit there and do nothing. You have to do something. You have to speak up. You have to stand up. You have to take action. You've got to have that courage to join the conga line, right? Put your arms on the shoulders of the person in front of you and just dance in that conga line, because ultimately that's how we're building, right? And I say that in jest, but in reality, we do have to take action. Anyway, we're going to get to your calls and more momentarily. I see we've got calls from all over the globe. We got the Philippines online, Delaware, Kentucky, Wisconsin, Idaho, and more. Give me a call, 833-4-VALDEZ.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
What's up, America? Merry Christmas. Hi there. Good evening. I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to Hour 3 of the program, Open Phone America. Feel free to give us a call, 833-482-5337, 8334 Valdez is the phone number. And earlier I'd mentioned a little bit about Rand Paul's Festivus report. He does this every year, and it's fantastic. This year, he exposed over $900 billion in government squander from, again, funding the A-list to tourism in Egypt. And there's a little bit of a list of what they have in this article. Let me see if I can pull it up. But I also want to get to your calls because I think that's important as well. And I see that there's a bunch of people on hold. So while I fix this Festivus thing, I want to get a handle from you guys. Something I want to talk about tonight. And again, if you've never called the show, feel free to call tonight because I want to hear from you. I want to get a sense of what you're planning for Christmas, how you're celebrating for Christmas, maybe your favorite Christmas story. I don't have a ton of Christmas stories, but I can tell you there's an electronics chain that started in Brooklyn, New York. And they're all over the East Coast. I don't know if they're all over the country or not, but they're called PC Richard and Son. And I remember as a kid, there was a PC Richards on Avenue U in Brooklyn. And as I grew up and moved to Jersey, there's one on Kennedy Boulevard in West New York, New Jersey, Hudson County. And part of what I learned was that, it was a good place to buy things. It was like a family-owned appliance and electronics chain. And for years, they had this commercial with Santa Claus in it. And the Santa from that commercial, I happened to meet. And this guy is legitimately a heavy-set dude with a genuinely white beard and a husky voice. And he, in reality, looks like Santa. And because he looks so much like Santa and he's an actor, he gets a lot of Santa work all year long. And one year, I don't remember what year it was, but many years ago, probably about 8 or 9 years ago now, maybe 10, I hired him to come to my family's Noche Buena celebration. And we were at my brother's place. And the kids were young enough, but probably all on their last year of thinking, is Santa real? And it was a great experience. This guy came in, I created some distractions, threw something out the window that hit the side of the house, made it sound like it was on the roof. And I was like, what is that, reindeer? It was approaching midnight. It was something like 10:30 at night. I said, maybe he got here early. Maybe his GPS isn't working. It was just really fun. And there was other family members there. But he came in and he did, an amazing show, if you will. And I remember my youngest daughter or my niece, one or the other, went to him and put her hands on her hips and with a lot of sass said, "You're not really Santa, are you?" And he ripped open his Santa Claus jacket as if he were a flasher. And he had a T-shirt under his Santa suit that said, "Yes, I am the real Santa." It was so funny and the timing was so good. We took a lot of pictures and it was wonderful. And I learned that it's really fun and nice to bring Santa to your family gathering, right? At least once. It's a fun experience, especially if there's kids, obviously. But that was something that we did. And I want to hear about some of the things you're doing because, again, I'm not going to be with you for a few days. We will have some of our, I love to call it our greatest hits, the best of programs, some of our best interviews from throughout the year that got the most questions and people wanted to hear again, and things that I think will be beneficial to you, lifestyle topics, not all politics all the time, but some interesting stuff. Anyway, all that being said, I want to hear from you guys, and I want to go to one of our longtime callers, Gil from Manila, Philippines, listening online to Rich Valdez, AmericaAtNight.com. Gil, Merry Christmas, sir.
Feliz Navidad.
Feliz Navidad. How are you, sir?
Well, I'm getting better. You know, I had some health issues, and I'll be getting a new hearing aid after the first of the year, thanks to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs.
Amen.
So I'll get some of my hearing back. But you mentioned P.C. Richards. I used to buy things at the P.C. Richards in Queens. The one close to the studio where they filmed Law and Order. You know, that's all filmed in New York. And I remember I was at P.C. Richards one day, and they brought in a whole busload of sailors from a Greek ship that was in New York Harbor, and they all came there to do their shopping. But are they still as active as they used to be? PC Richards?
I don't see the commercials anymore because I don't watch a lot of TV. And TV's kind of gone streaming for so many people, and I cut the cord years ago. But they're still around. They always have deals. I know that they still exist. I went to one not too long ago, and some years ago I bought like a new stainless steel fridge and a set of stainless steel appliances, and I got a really good deal from them. So I think they're still rocking and rolling.
Okay. Well, the reason I called is you were talking about the issues with the border, and they're having record numbers of border crossers over the last week, over 10,000 a day. And most of them are coming from Venezuela. And we just did a prisoner swap with Venezuela. I'm surprised you didn't discuss it on the show. Venezuela was illegally holding American citizens, and they were swapped for a friend of the current president of Venezuela. So I thought that that bore mentioning, and just one quick thing before I go.
Sure.
My hearing's not too good, so I'm not sure I'm on key, but Feliz Navidad.
Feliz
Navidad. Feliz Navidad. Prospero año y felicidad. You know, Jose Feliciano is my contemporary.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that was an amazing rendition of Feliz Navidad. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I checked. He's still alive. He's in his 80s and doing as well as possible, I guess. And this is just a message to all listening. You know, I was like your predecessor. I was Santa Claus every Christmas. And I couldn't do it this year because of my health issues.
Oh, man.
And but I would work on weekends, and during the weekdays I would be Santa Claus at the orphanages, and it was a great deal of fun. You know, anytime you can make a kid happy, it doesn't take much.
Yeah,
anyhow,
you know what? I feel the same way about Christmas overall with people, with everybody, whether it's a kid or anybody else. If I can play a hand in any way in brightening someone's day, making life better for them, doing something that would really be helpful, you know, even cracking a joke or whatever, I try to be helpful because I feel a little nostalgic during Christmas, a little bit more generous than normal. And I think many people do, right? You tend to see more. And when you live on the East Coast, it's cold here, and you kind of go through a lot of it. And I totally get what you're saying. So, Gil, thank you for the call, brother. I appreciate you. Godspeed to you. I won't speak with you again until after the new year. So blessings to you and yours. And just keep resting and doing what you got to do. You'll be Santa again next year. Thank you, Gil.
Thank you.
You bet. Merry Christmas. Folks, we're going to come back with the rest of your calls and more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, we're taking your call straight till 1 a.m. Open Phone America. Let us continue here. Let's go with, where are we going? We're going with Scott, La Crosse, Wisconsin, WIZM. Scott, go right ahead.
Well, how are you tonight, Rich?
Wonderful, thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you. I'm a kind of a recent listener, maybe 6 months or so, and I really do enjoy the show up here in La Crosse. I just had a little interesting point about, I looked up the Google and I was looking up the amount of registered voters in the country, and it came up to be somewhere around like 168 million, I believe. I'm not exactly sure. It was somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
And then the voter, it said that 68%, 67.8 or something in there voted. Now, if you took a calculator and went 168 times 0.68, I think you get around 114 million.
Okay.
Where do all these votes come from that say 81 and 74? Doesn't that equal like 155 million maybe? Or I don't know if my math is right or not, but...
Well, I mean, it's not incredibly off.
Like a 90% turnout. How did we have a 90% turnout when Google says we have a 66.8%? I don't understand the numbers, and maybe I'm the only one that knows this or looked on there and is doing this math. I don't know.
I don't know either. But what I could say is, I mean, it doesn't seem incredibly skewed, right? It seems like the voter universe seems to be that big. Of course, I think it gives many of us pause where we can say, wow, how did so-and-so get 81 million votes? And how did that happen? I'm with many people on this one. It doesn't seem accurate to me. I do think it was a high-stakes election, and a lot of people were out there voting against Trump. I think there are a lot of people there voting for Trump. I think very few people were there voting for Biden, right? I don't think anybody said, oh, my God, I can't miss the polls. I got to leave work early, boss. Why? I got to make sure I get my vote in for Joe. We love Joe. I love the way he sniffs people's hair. No, I don't think anybody's really supporting Joe. They were really just voting against Trump or voting for Trump. But I don't think they were voting for Joe. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just my belief. And with you, I agree that there's some discrepancies in numbers, but it doesn't seem outside of the realm of reason. I think there's an explanation for lots of things as we look at it. Most of it is some of it may be funny business, others maybe other things, but ultimately we can do better. And I think if looking at that data shows us anything, it's that we can be so close to something yet so far away. And I played this clip of audio of former President Trump a little earlier, but it's less than a minute. And I want you to hear it again because he talks about how the 2020 election was a giant scam and ultimately how it's truly a disgrace. Listen to this.
The most important poll released in the last 20 years came out stating that 20% of the mail-in ballots in the 2020 presidential election were rigged or defective. It was the Rasmussen poll, highly respected. That means that the election was a giant scam. You cannot have a fair and honest election as long as there are mail-in ballots involved. Cheating will always be prevalent. France and many other countries have stopped the madness. They got rid of their mail-in votes. The Republican Party must do something now. They have to work, they have to stick together, and they have to fight, because the Democrats cheat. They cheat like nobody has ever cheated before. It's a disgrace.
So, Scott, when you hear the president talk about this Rasmussen poll that cites how, 20%, I think it was 1 in 5. I remember doing this on the show a few days back. 1 in 5 voters says that they cheated, right? That they committed their own version of fraud based on how they were defining fraud in the survey, whether it was signing a ballot for somebody without their permission, dropping it off for them, ballot harvesting, et cetera, all sorts of things that went into violating that. And that's 1 in 5 on either side, right? It's not particular to Democrats or Republicans. So when you look at that and you say, wow, well, at least 20% of it, according to this piece, is, not legit because of it falling outside of the law, if you will. I think that's an interesting thing that I think if we looked more and deeper, we'd find out more about these topics. So I think that's part of the issue. I think the other part of the issue is making sure we don't have any or many ways to vote outside of the traditional way, right? Go to a booth and cast a vote. When you have this situation where we have all of these other types of ballots, mail-in ballots especially, it makes things way more difficult. And I think that's part of the problem, Scott. Now, what are your plans for Christmas? What are your traditions? You have family dinner at your house? You going to your family's house? What's the story?
Well, we lost a mother-in-law right before Christmas 2 years ago now. So it's a little smaller. We're up in Wisconsin. A lot of people in our family are from Chicago because that's where we're originally from, in western suburbs, and quite a few moved out to Arizona. So it's a small Christmas time, but that's okay. My brother-in-law's coming up with his wife, and we'll be fine. My son and I and my wife and my father-in-law. So,
Scott, it's always about quality.
It's a little dry, it's
over quantity, right?
It is, and then tomorrow's her second year, death anniversary. So
got
my wife some flowers and things, and flowers with her mom's favorite colors, and it all worked out. It's going to work out good.
Well, brother, I wish you and your family the best. Thanks for tuning in and becoming a recent listener. I appreciate it. Big shout out to everybody in La Crosse, Wisconsin on WIZM. Scott, Godspeed to you. And we're going to continue with the rest of your calls. We got calls from Kentucky, Delaware, Idaho, Oregon, South Dakota, and more. And again, if you miss any of the interviews we do on this, or if the market that you're in doesn't carry this program live, but they carry us on a delay, or whatever the situation is, you can always go back to our website, richvaldesamericaatnight.com, and go to the podcast section. You can hear every interview. They're all listed by the name of the guest and a little bit about what the show was about and a little blurb. It really is a fantastic tool. It's absolutely free. So make sure you do that. You can subscribe to the podcast as well, richvaldesamericaatnight.com. Click subscribe, share it with a friend. That's how we do what we do around here, folks. Anyway, we're coming right back your way, familia. Don't go anywhere. Rich Valdez, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
The clock has already hit midnight. It's the 23rd of December already. That means tomorrow night, technically, is Noche Buena and Christmas Eve, and where we will eat all the unhealthy stuff that us Puerto Ricans like to eat to celebrate Christmas, the birth of Jesus. And what a delight it is, honestly. It's one of my favorite times of year. Anyway, there's a vibrating pill that may help with obesity by making your stomach feel full. This is in the newscientist.com. Swallowing this pill fitted with a vibrating motor resulted in pigs eating less, suggesting a possible new approach for treating obesity. Yep, that's a thing. So I'm looking at the pill. It's like a little capsule with a little battery thing in it. I think that's insane, honestly. The pill contains a vibrating motor powered by a small silver oxide battery. When it reaches the gut, gastric acid dissolves its outer layer. This causes an electric circuit to short, and it closes out, and that starts the vibration. Now, this vibrating pill tricks your brain into thinking that your stomach is full, and they think it one day could treat obesity. Giovanni Traverso at the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and his colleagues developed this pill around the size of a standard multivitamin that has this vibrating motor powered by a small silver oxide battery, and boom, they think this thing is going to work. In the experiment with the pigs, some of them were given the pill 20 minutes before being given access to food. This is interesting. And the pigs ate around 40% less compared to pigs that had not taken the vibrating pill. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm sold. I don't know if I'm going to ingest a vibrating pill. I doubt it really a lot. Very much so, I doubt it. But anyway, you guys let me know your thoughts on this and everything else that we're talking about. We've got a lot on the table right here. We're talking about Christmas. We're talking about the state of our country and everything else happening in between. Where did I want to go? Let's see. We got a lot of people here. Let's go to Elvis, Morgantown, Kentucky on WKCT. Elvis, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Well, he got that down wrong. I guess it's Otis, O-T-I-S.
Oh, Otis. Okay, that's fine. That works for me, too. O-T-I-S. Welcome, sir.
Yes. How you doing, Rich? And Merry Christmas to you and everyone else, and a Happy New Year. We hope everything will be fine. I'm optimistic about this Supreme Court ruling. You know, maybe the tide is turning and everything for Republicans. And
could be.
Following Gil there now, it's hard to follow Gil. He's got my heart warmed up, that story and everything Gil gave there. And
Gil's great.
I'm with Scott too and everything. There's never been a sitting president got 10 million extra votes, you know, from his first time and ever lost. Never before. I'd love to see an audit in Michigan and a few other places. That'll never happen though. But my point is, I was telling your caller, I know Donald Trump's a patriot. More than I ain't going to talk about the other group and everything there, but Donald Trump, I see some parallels with our founding fathers. They pledged their lives, their treasures, and sacred honor. Donald Trump has lost money, we know, and he's gave his salary up also for charity. And him and Melania, First Lady here about 6 years ago, am I not wrong? They stayed in the White House during Christmas during a budget dispute. Everything when Nancy Pelosi and him was in there.
Yeah.
And he also
I think that was the same year that he surprised the troops on Thanksgiving.
Oh, yes. Yes, he flew over there. That's right.
Yeah.
And, of course, Nancy Pelosi and him was in charge of everything. And before they got out there, if you'll remember it, Adam Schiff, he was wanting to do with whistleblowers. Thank God these whistleblowers. We wouldn't be where we're at now. A little bit of optimism anyway. But, my tradition, it's not going to, I'm the last of my family. I'm done getting old and everything. I will go a mile out the road here to my nieces and say grace. I'm the patriarch kind of the family, about 6 nieces and nephews left. I've had my times back years ago. I'm a divorcee and everything.
All right.
But I really do enjoy your program and your parodies. Keep that up, Rich. You're doing great. And
thank you, Otis.
I know that Larry King and Jim Bohannon would be very proud of you. I'm looking forward to next year. You know, you have a very good selection. I don't want to keep up too much time. The best joke I heard this year, a 10-second joke.
Yep.
A skunk, a deer, and a duck went out to dinner. When the check came, the skunk didn't have a cent, the deer didn't have a buck, so they put the bill on the duck's bill. The check on the duck's bill.
That was very funny. I love it. Well, thank you.
We all need to be looking up. Listen, we need to, just get the Justice Department straightened out and fair elections in the country, and we'll all be happy.
Otis, I think you're 100% right here. I thank you for everything that you said. Very kind of you to say it. I appreciate it. And you're right. We do need to keep looking up. We need to improve things. And I think I sense things are getting better. I know there's a bunch of people that follow me that like to chime in the comments and tell me, oh, Rich, get ready. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse before it gets better. I just happen to be very optimistic. Even though I could look at a glass half empty, I still think America's the best country on the planet. I'm very biased that way, and I feel like we're going to get better. We're going to improve. Things are not going to be horrible for our children. I get concerned and I get nervous, but ultimately we talk ourselves off the ledge and we move forward. So, Otis, thank you for the call from Morgantown, Kentucky. Great conversation with you. Big shout out to WKCT. And let me see. We'll do another one here, and then we'll go to the break. They'll yell at me in my ear, but I'll pretend I don't hear it. Let's go to Boise, Idaho, and check in with Paulie. Paulie's listening online. Rich Valdez, America at Night. Go right ahead. Merry Christmas.
Thanks for taking my call. Merry Christmas.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for the great shows you put on every night that I listen.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to mention you were talking about ego the other night.
Yeah.
And I don't think I know a man that doesn't have one.
Sure.
It's where it gets overblown and humility is not part of it, is where we run into trouble. And when we can temper it and keep it down, but still have it and know we have it and utilize it, then it becomes valuable to us instead of a really bad draw.
Paul, I think you're right about that. And it's not just ego that works that way, right? But I think it's a lot of things. There's a psychologist that I'm a big fan of, Dr. Jordan Peterson. And he did an interview where he was talking about passivity and danger. And I wish I had it so I could play it for you, because I paraphrasing it won't do it justice. But ultimately he says, the key, like, the secret, right, to life or to figuring things out is to be able to remain dangerous, not just to know things, but to actually be able to hurt people, to kill people, and then not doing it. And he said that is what it's all about. It's all about making sure that you have this potential and capacity to do lots of things, but you don't do them. But you have it there should you need to do it, to defend your family, to defend your country, to do whatever. And I thought it was a remarkable statement, because he said it's really, you have to be able to be dangerous. If you're not able to be dangerous, and it's very similar to what you're saying, that, everybody has an ego and you need one. And you're right. How could I get on the radio every day and not have an ego? I need the ego to do what we do. But the ego can become your enemy. Right. So it's a really interesting place to be, and kind of a little bit of a dance that you have to have, where you don't let the ego get the better of you, like you mentioned, but you have enough of it to thrive in the situation that you're in, so you can be authoritative, so you can really deliver a good show or a good presentation one way or another.
Right. I did want to, however, mention real quick, if I may.
Sure.
Secretary of State Blinken, he came out of the blocks. The first thing he did was up in Alaska when he met with the Chinese, was he bowed his head and kissed their tuchus.
Oh, yeah, I remember. And he apologized for the United States.
Yeah, he did. And that was just despicable. And then the next thing he did was he apologized for Afghanistan and the great job that they did getting everybody out of there. And that one turned my stomach. And, and then I look on the board over there at Penn University, that the China Biden shop over there, I forget the exact name. The
Biden Penn Center.
Right, thank you. Yes, and guess where they found some of those documents, the classified and the top secret, were there. Yep. So he could be implicated too, but...
Well, there's no shortage of places to look or things to do. When it comes to Joe Biden, I think he's just a sloppy guy that gets a pass on a lot of things. And we're going to see what happens as we move forward. But thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. Merry Christmas to you and your family. God bless. Folks, we're coming back to the rest of your calls straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. I had somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So welcome back. Rich Valdez here with you straight till 1 a.m. We're getting through all of your calls as we discuss Christmas traditions and whatever issues you want to talk about here in the United States. Lots to discuss. I wanted to go to Donato in Wilmington, Delaware. Let's get a little perspective on Joe El Baboso Biden. Donato, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome. Merry Christmas.
Hey, Rich. Thank you. Merry Christmas to you. You're doing a nice job.
Thank you.
In an Italian-American, I'm first generation. My parents were immigrants to the United States.
Seven Fishes.
An Italian-American. Yes. The Feast of the Seven Fishes. Now, Mom and Dad are gone. All my uncles and aunts are gone. I tried over the years to keep the tradition going. Those people worked very hard. It's not easy.
Oh, my God,
and you know, I don't know how they do it. Now we go out. We go out on Christmas Eve because I've tried to do what they did, and I miss them dearly, and they made it happen, and I'm not half the man they were when it comes to the Feast of the Seven Fishes, I'll tell you.
I love that you brought that up. I was telling my daughter about this yesterday, and I was saying, she was like, I don't understand. Why do we? What? She's like, all of my friends celebrate Christmas on Christmas Day, and I was like, well, we don't do that. I was like, my whole life, my parents, we did, and everybody we knew, we did all, and again, we didn't do Seven Fishes, but it was a very similar type of thing, right? Midnight Mass came on at midnight. We ate what we ate. You guys ate Seven Fishes, and whatever the tradition was. But the party was all night long, and it was like a New Year's Eve party for Christmas. And you're right that they put in so much hard work. My mom used to grind these plantains to make this dough, almost is the best way to put it, to make these pasteles, right? They're like tamales almost, and they have pork inside and whatever. It's an hours long. I'm talking like a half a day's worth, 8, 9, 10 hours worth of work to make this dish. And then they have to be boiled after they're ground down by hand. And it's just a lot of work. And I remember one year she got a food processor and it made it a little bit easier, but it was so much work. But that's what they knew, right? They knew hard work. They knew that was the life that they lived. And of course, the rest of us that didn't grow up with that life didn't. My dad grew up on a farm. I didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. And then Hudson County, New Jersey. We had running water. We had electricity. We didn't have any farm animals. So, obviously we lose tradition, but because of the upward mobility that we have in life. And so when you say that, you tried hard, I believe you. I try hard too. Now me trying hard looks like me ordering pasteles from somebody that makes them and making sure that we eat them. And I force my kids, hey, you better eat that. You better eat that. It's tradition. But it's fascinating to hear. And I know so many ethnic cultures have different traditions, like the Italians, like the Puerto Ricans, like a lot of people. And it's always a pleasure for me to hear those things. Anyway, Donato, I know you wanted to chime in on Joe El Baboso Biden. Go right ahead.
I'll go real fast. So I was born in 71. He was elected in 72. So he's been here my whole life, right? And I don't know how many of your listeners have ever met a native Delawarean. There's not many of us. And so I find some people have no idea where Delaware is, and I laugh at that. It's okay. He's not the Joe Biden now that we all knew. And listen, he was always goofy, and he always said the wrong things. He was kind of like a jock. And you expect so much from a guy that's played football and hit his head too many times. But he was our Joe Biden, and we took him for what he was. But he became vice president. Very few of us here at home ever expected that. And I think that was the beginning of the change, because before that, Joe Biden was a very friendly, feet on the ground. He walked in parades. He walked in the Puerto Rican Day parade on 4th Street, right past my house
the one.
when I grew up.
It's funny. He talked about that one day, and he said, I was raised by the Puerto Rican community and politically. And I thought that was so funny. Donato, I love talking to you. Have a great Christmas. I got to hit a break here, but we're going to come right back. Godspeed to you. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, Feliz Navidad to the best audience talk radio's ever had. Each and every one of you are a blessing to me. I want to go to Katie in Reading, Pennsylvania, WEEU. Go right ahead, Katie, quickly.
Okay, hi. Since Jim passed, I've always been concerned about, prayer and good deeds and stuff. And I was thinking, would it not be a good thing that on the nights that he made the announcement that he was ill, at the time that he did it, that whoever you're on the phone with, talking to at that day and time, that they should be able to express their own intentions and that we should all pray for them and in honor of Jim and having a miracle?
I love that idea. Honestly, I think we should do that all the time. I think prayer is one of those things that moves mountains. In life, I realize that I'm such a incapable man, and there's so few things that I have control over. And ultimately, we have to let go. We have to let God do his thing, and we have to be comfortable in God's will so that we can really embrace uncertainty willfully, right, and enjoy it and look forward to the uncertainty. Otherwise, we kind of thrash around misery in our heads by overthinking. Katie, excellent idea. I love it, and hopefully we can put that into practice. Feliz Navidad, everybody. Godspeed to you. Merry Christmas. I wish you the best of New Year's. Keep tuning in. You're going to enjoy the interviews. And hasta la próxima. Until the next time, America. I'll talk to you in 2024. I'm Rich Valdez.